All right, we're just going to be starting in a little bit here. Just waiting for a few more people to trickle in, and then we'll start the show. Thank you, everyone, for taking a small part of your evening out to join us in a little discussion about long distance motorcycle riding. So, we do have a few um, ground rules with this one. And first off, we're going to be running this like a webinar. So if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make during this broadcast, please feel free to put them in the comments section. And if there are questions or anything of the sort, I can see them on my screen here and I can answer them in real time. So your questions can potentially be part of the actual presentation itself, and also will help contribute to the discussions that we're going to have this evening. Hello, nice to see Minnesota representing today. Let's look at some California people here. um, for many riders, these kind of things are old hat. But I hope that regardless of how long you've been riding a motorcycle or how far you've ridden a motorcycle, that you might use this as an opportunity to either pull some new information, learn something, pass it on to a newer rider, something that'll just help the motorcycle community as a whole. Because the big thing is, and this is something I've noticed from being on many groups, social media groups that involve motorcycling, is that there's a lot of different opinions about things. There's a lot of things that are said that don't have that are usually said in the wrong context, or may possibly apply to one type of riding situation but not others. So in many cases, we just want to make sure that we keep an open mind here and focus on what's important, which is getting, riding, enjoying it, and getting to your destination, or how many ever destinations you choose to go on, get there safely. And that's really the whole point of this entire presentation tonight. So without further ado, I think it's about 4 past the hour. We'll go ahead and start. So welcome to Long Distance Motorcycle Rides 101. This is an absolute it's been an absolute privilege to be able to put something like this together, and I'm very glad that I can take some of the experiences that I've had in my own riding career, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and pass them on. One of the big things that inspired me to create this presentation was that, for those who are new to this group, I am a member of Women on Wheels, and Women on Wheels is an international female motorcycle enthusiast organization that is based here in the U.S., and it is comprised of riders from the United States, Canada, and also we have a few internationals. And the whole point is, as I mentioned, Women on Wheels is a motorcycle enthusiast organization, which means it is open to anyone and everyone who love motorcycles and the people who ride them. And that is the whole point of the organization that I'm part of. And every year we do this one thing called a ride-in. We just concluded our ride-in late last month, actually the end of June, in Rapid City, South Dakota, and it was an opportunity for me to go back to the good old days when riding tons of miles to get from point A to point B was fun, and it still is. But of course, it always requires a bit of preparation. So let's get started. So I am your presenter. My name is Christine Malazarte. I've been riding motorcycles since 2004. I actually started in college. So this year is officially 20 years that I have been on a motorcycle. I've been to quite a few places, including the one in the picture. If you don't recognize that, that is the last Blockbuster on the planet in Bend, Oregon. It's one of a few places I've been to. Actually, this one was my second trip there. I've ridden currently to 45 U.S. states and 3 Canadian provinces, so British Columbia being the latest one, but I've also been to Ontario and Manitoba. I've done a few long distance rides. We're not going to be talking about the infamous iron butt rides today, but I've done a few of those. I did work in the motorcycle industry for several years, and in everything, including parts, apparel, service, pretty much short of uh, turning a wrench on a bike that didn't belong to me. And in those 20 years, I've ridden more than 350,000 miles on many, many bikes. Some of them big, some of them small, some of them scooters, some of them spiders. I mean, you name it, I've probably sat on it, ridden it. I've had a lot of fun on bikes. There's always a fun one, and you just have to, get on one and go. That's the beautiful part about being on motorcycles. So this is what we're going to be discussing today. So we have, in this particular presentation, I have 6 sections, and they are as follows. We've got your bike, so preparing for the big trip, things to consider. We have your supplies and loadout. What are you taking with you? And also preparing for the weird. Hydration and cooling, which is section 3. Because I'll tell you, we need water or we don't survive, as you know. Section 4 is our mental and physical fortitude, is how do you prepare for these kind of things? How do you put yourself in a position where you are mentally sound to do what you are about to do? And also physically, are you ready for the long hours on the saddle and going from point A to point B and the temperature changes and things like that? Next, we'll be going into a little bit of ride planning. Are you thinking interstates? You thinking back roads? You thinking all of the above? Are you planning to camp? You've got a lot of options here. And last but not least, something fun. I talk a little bit about some of the weird running jokes that I have in my long distance journeys. For those who know me very well, they usually involve a Swedish furniture store. So we're going to talk about that in a bit. With that being said, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the comments section, and I'll answer them in real time. And like I said, thank you for contributing to our conversation. So, question is, what is long distance riding? So there's a lot of ways to describe long distance riding, but in my point of view, I consider long distance riding is traveling longer and farther than you would in a normal situation. For example, some of you might use your bike to commute to work, usually if the weather's good, or if you are one of those Californians that hates traffic a lot, it's your alternative. It is your car. So that would be one definition. Second definition would be heading to a destination where you probably need to pack supplies, possibly an overnighter bag, because you're not going to be going directly home. That would be a second definition of a long distance ride. And my other definition of a long distance ride is riding far enough that going straight home in one shot is not your most viable option. So if you're traveling and it's going to take you a day and a half to 2 days to get home, congratulations, your long distance ride. For us Californians here, I live in Los Angeles, and San Diego is only 120 miles away. That means that I am only 120 miles away from the Mexican border. So technically, if I don't cross the border and I hang out in San Diego, I know that I could be home in about 2.5 to 3 hours. So that would be a minor distance trip, but it wouldn't be something I would consider to be the absolute crazy adventure that would require me to get a hotel unless I really didn't want to, slog it up the 5 freeway. So that is what we would consider to be long distance riding in the context of our discussions today. So, general considerations when you are riding is that to do any sort of distance on a motorcycle, especially if you are newer to the sport, you have to ride to get better at riding. It's like when you're learning, if you remember when you got your driver's license and you learned how to drive, it's the same thing. If you've never ridden far, you're going to have to work up to those distances. I've come across many people who would go in and say, hey, I really don't know if I could ever do a ride that is this far. There's no way that I could do something that is of distance. And I beg to differ, because you don't know till you've tried. So why not try it? Also, long distance riding, there's no speeding involved with this. You're just trying to get from point A to point B safely, and it just takes you longer. For example, if you were trying to get down to San Diego, would you be doing 90 when everyone else wasn't? I wouldn't think so. I hope not, you know. I mean, you have to deal with California Highway Patrol and Border Patrol. That probably would be a bad idea. But it's meant to be enjoyed, you know, enjoying the ride and doing these things because you can. Also, as I was told when I first started riding a motorcycle, is to ride your own ride. You know, if the person in front of you happens to take those twisties a little farther, a little faster than you like, and they're a little spicy, you don't have to be spicy with them unless you want to. Okay? You're going to get there. You're going to get to your destination. Of course, as you improve as a rider, as you gain wisdom on the road, as you improve your skills and you practice more, your limits are subject to change. What you thought was difficult or impossible 2 years ago may not be the case now. You know, there are some moments where I still have to stretch a few things in my own limits, but then I realize, okay, we're cool. We can do this. You're not going to know till you try. So, as my major disclaimers here is that what I suggest in this presentation, they're meant to inspire, they're meant to start a conversation. Okay, everyone's got a different bike, everyone's got a different preference as to what they consider to be a reasonable ride in a single day. Everyone's experiences, their unique experiences, will shape how they prepare for rides. And as you learn to ride these long distances, you're going to change up a lot of things. You know, I've been riding, like I said, for 20 years, and there were things even specifically for this last trip I did that I changed up because a few things changed. First off, it had been more than a decade since I had been able to ride a ride that let me pass across 5 states minimum. The other thing too is that I was on a new bike, a newer to me bike that I had never taken on a trip that long before. So I had to think about new ideas and thoughts because I was changing not only the size of the bike, but the style of the bike too. So this is not an end-all guide to preparing anything. This is only scratching the surface because since I'm not really sure of my audience here and I'm not really sure what people are riding, you know, this is meant to be very generalized and, like I said, to start that conversation and to just get these ideas in your head. Also, my other disclaimer is that this is based on my own personal experiences. Even though I did mention I am a member of Women on Wheels, this does not reflect any opinions of my organization or anybody that I ride with. And also, when you are riding, I encourage you to follow the law. Okay? You know, obey those state and regional traffic and safety laws. I remember when I was riding into Canada, I had to give myself a refresher because the last time I had ridden in Canada, there was a special rule about the carpool lanes and whether or not motorcycles were allowed, and I find out that the rule had been changed. So there was a few things that I had to brush up on, knowing that I was going to enter another country. So it's just some stuff to think about. So let's get on with it. This is section 1 about your bike. Is how do you get it ready? What do you do with your bike? What are things that I need to think about? So the first thing that is important is your luggage and storage. Where are you going to put all the stuff you're taking with you? So as normal, you've got your saddlebags and your panniers. The differences between saddlebags and panniers, it's almost an interchangeable term. Usually panniers are hard cases and saddlebags tend to be softer cases, depending on the style of bike you have. You may even have something that's semi-rigid, which means it's got a more like a leatherette or a softer outside, but it still has the rigidity of something harder. You also have your tank bags. And if you're one of those camping people, especially if you've been thinking of camping, you know, I think you might like applying many of your camping experiences to storage on a motorcycle because if you're backpacking and stuff like that, you know, you got to cinch stuff down and you know, keeping things waterproof just in case you run into that occasional rainstorm, especially if you are riding at distance. I often say that when you're riding at distance, that especially if it's at least 500 miles in a single direction, to expect anywhere from a 30 to 60 degree fluctuation in temperature, either up or down. So these are things to consider, especially when you're taking your stuff with you, because you don't want something getting soaked when it's not supposed to be. There's other bags that also may apply. For example, fairing bags, which means that you could hitch them onto other parts of your motorcycle. So if you see the picture on the bottom right hand corner, there's a bag that is, I have a tank bag right on my bike there, but right above it is this kind of black square looking thing that is actually attached to my handlebars. That is a handlebar bag, and that is specifically because I ride an adventure bike, which I'll go into in a bit. Also, there's different kinds of tie downs. My favorite one of all time, rock straps. If you've used rock straps, what they are a type of bungee based cord where one side is a nylon standard strap, and then the other side is a bungee, and it's locked together with a cam buckle, not a cam buckle, but a snap buckle. And the cool thing about that particular type of strap is that it doesn't use hooks. It actually uses a closed loop system. So you can pretty much loop that thing around any part of your motorcycle and not damage the plastic or any other surfaces on the bike. I swear by those particular straps. Those have been used to hold down everything from cases that I've had to use to carry camera equipment with me across the country, all the way to an office chair. And I have a weird story about that if someone reminds me later. I can talk about how I was living in Ohio at the time, and someone was giving away an office chair, and I didn't have my car at the time, but I had a bunch of these straps. So I strapped down, I might as well just tell you the story, but I took like 5 rock straps. Don't try this at home, kids. But I strapped that office chair to the back of my sport touring bike and took it all the way home. I got so many stairs down the road for that one, but I got myself an office chair and I can't complain. So those are some of those luggage things. If you have any questions about anything that's more model specific, I can provide a little bit more information about that. So other questions that we ask ourselves too is ergonomics. You know, how do you feel when you ride? Because some of the things that you think are comfortable now, you're going to ask yourself, is it going to be comfortable? It's comfortable at 50 miles, but is it going to be comfortable at 150 miles? Is it going to be comfortable at 300 miles? And really, the only way to find out is to test all your equipment. And in many cases, that also involves having to go on practice runs so that you can get used to the distance. So, fun story here is in terms of Women on Wheels, we have a regional rally that happened earlier this year, and it took place in Tucson, Arizona. And in Tucson, Arizona, from Los Angeles is about 500 miles. And there are a couple of ways to get to Tucson from LA, and one of them involved a very lonely highway known as US Interstate 8. And it starts in San Diego and ends basically somewhere between Phoenix and like leading into Tucson. So you could take it as the alternative bypass to Interstate 10. Now, the thing with Interstate 8 versus 10 is that 8 has elevation, and 8 has a lot of twisties at the very beginning of 8, especially in the area around San Diego as you're leaving California. And this was really, for me, the ultimate test for the motorcycle that I used for this last trip, which is a 2017 BMW R1200 GS. The bike was relatively new to me at the time that I picked it up. I actually, at the time of this ride to Tucson, I had only owned it for a year, and I had not done very much to it in terms of upgrading ergonomic stuff as a result I wasn't riding very far, so I didn't really have a need at the time. So this 500-mile one-way ride was a very good way of me saying, okay, what can I keep? What needs to go? What needs to be upgraded? And I'll tell you, about 200 or so miles in, I started realizing very quickly that I needed to upgrade a few things. First thing that needed to go, the windshield. The windshield that I was using was the stock one. It was too short, and I noticed that the wind was blowing right into my face, which was an issue, especially with buffeting and fatigue. Other things, too, is that as I was getting higher in elevation, and this was March, temperatures were dropping into the low 50s. And even with heated grips on my BMW, I was realizing that the handguards were not cutting it in terms of helping prevent the amount of wind coming into my fingers. So that was also upgraded as well as I was dealing with this stuff. Other things, the seat. I was using a seat that it was a stock seat from BMW. I inherited this bike at 45,000 miles, so that means that this bike had been this seat was 45,000 miles old, about 6 years. And I realized that I needed to add padding on this bike upon my return. My solution to that was going to a professional upholsterer up the street from my house, who did an awesome job, and it's the reason why the seat I have now was able to withstand a 5,500 mile trip, and I had no problem. So it took me about 1,500 miles total from this trip back in March to prepare me for a ride in late June. And as soon as I got home, it was definitely one of those things where I went, okay, time to get online and start ordering some stuff. Thankfully, my experience in the motorcycle industry and also having worked at a BMW motorcycle dealership as a parts manager allowed me to do this, having the product knowledge to know what I needed to order. So it was a good time for that. Next bullet here is handlebars and foot controls. So that's also asking yourself, do my handlebars need to be tweaked? Do I need better pegs? Do I need a floorboard? Do I need highway bars? Asking yourself those questions. Going back to that whole seat feel, my biggest problem was as I was riding back on the 10 freeway, so I took the 8 to go to Tucson. I took 10 all the way back. Is that I had been sitting on that seat so long that I was feeling the plastic at the bottom. The foam was giving up. And I knew that that was not going to fly if I was trying to do what I was, that big ride that I was going to do. And also going back to that whole windshield thing. The windshield is such an important part of the bike, especially if you want to ride for a long time in comfort, because the windshield does more than just keep bugs off your chest. It redirects the wind in such a way that it keeps your bike aerodynamic, and it also reduces the noise going to your helmet. So there's a lot of advantages to having a windshield that works for you. And it's not just having a super tall windshield, you need to have one that's functional. The basic rule of thumb is that the height of your windshield you should be able to look over it when you're sitting on the bike normally. You don't want to have it over your head, because not only does that mess with the wind currents going over your head, it also could possibly be a hazard just in case something lands on your windshield that may impede your vision. So it is very important to be able to look over your windshield, not through it. Going to navigation and phone mounts. So GPS or map. Some people are old school with the map. That's totally fine. But it's a matter of where you're sticking it. I've had people go old school and use painter's tape and painter's tape and a page protector and tape it on their tank. Some people like that. Some people like a Post-it note on their windshield. That's totally fine too. Or if you have one of those Garmin GPSs, that's definitely an option. Or if it's your smartphone, which is actually one of the most common nowadays, is that we've gotten to a point where smartphones have taken over in regards to navigation software and power. I still remember my old Garmin Zumo 550 from 15 years ago. That was such a cool device. And I put all my MP3s and I preloaded them on there, and then I hooked up my headphones. And yeah, nowadays it's Bluetooth headset, Bluetooth to the phone attached by USB to a charger on my bike, and it doesn't need any more. And if I do get in a little bit of rain, it's okay, because the phone is actually rated for a level of waterproofness that is totally okay. Go figure. Technology is a weird thing. So, and then asking yourself, what kind of mount would you be using? The most common ones that I've seen, and you can actually, if you look at the picture here, by the way, this is in front of Peterson's Donut Corner, in Escondido, California. It's a donut shop that's open 24 hours. Go get some donuts in Escondido. They're bomb. You can see on my bike that I have two different kinds of smartphone mounts, because sometimes when I'm doing rides that involve endurance or long distance trial, I have two phones mounted on my computer, on my cockpit here, and And with that being said, it is a personal preference depending on how much technology you want to have in front of your face. But when I was doing my more technical rides, having one phone do certain jobs and one phone doing others was beneficial for me. So that was a personal thing. And of course, when you're charging your phones and things like that, it is very easy nowadays. And many newer bikes come with their own charging ports. BMWs have always come with a Euro port, and I've seen a lot of other bikes come with their own USB ports. So there are ways to do it. Also, some of these, especially like the Quad Lock and the X Grip, they have options for wireless charging. So you can wireless charge your phone. It won't be as fast as plugging in with a USB. But if you're riding for a long time, who really cares, because it's going to charge anyway. So you do have that as well. All right. So now we're getting to supplies and loadout. What am I taking with me? Because I know a few people who have this really horrible habit about overpacking. Sometimes you got to be simple about it and know that you can't take everything with you. So the question is, how do we figure that out? Well, I'll start with a couple suggestions here. And I like to split them up in two different categories. First off, I like to think about myself, because, well, ultimately I am the pilot of this asphalt plane, and I want to make sure that I have everything I need to keep myself comfortable, because happy pilot equals happy ride. And so I think about things like, what are some snacks I should be taking with me? I might need that rain suit. By the way, rain suits are not only just for rain. You can also use them as an extra layer, just in case the temperatures drop farther than you expected them to. Of course, extra layers. If you need the extra shirt, or you need to put on a windproof jersey, or something that would help you as you're getting into the later hours on your ride. I cannot emphasize the importance of a cooling scarf or vest, or both. In my case here, with the way that my equipment is set up, I prefer the cooling scarf, which is basically a soakable neck tube that goes across my neck and cools me down. It's very convenient. I just soak it every time. I just need a nice feeling of coolness. Very good riding boots. You don't want to be running around in your tennis shoes. That's no fun. And also because if it's hot, or if you have good boots, they're going to regulate temperature extremely well, and you'll be comfortable no matter what you're in. I used one pair of boots for my entire giant 10 state, one Canadian province, 16-day, 5,500-mile trip that happened earlier this month. And the boots I have are waterproof with Gore-Tex, but when the temperatures hit 113 degrees, my feet still felt okay, because it was regulating the temperatures as best as they could. Also, I strongly recommend full riding gear. I will get into later my take on what to ride in when you're riding through hot weather, because it may sound a little counterintuitive, but hear me out. And also, having a pocket knife or Leatherman on your person. There have been times where I've had to bust out the knife to open some packages, or the bag of chips that was being stubborn. But it's always good to have a knife on you. The one that I carry personally has a seatbelt cutter and a door and a glass breaker, because it may not be for me. It may be to help someone else. So I do have that. And it's also bright orange, so it's pretty obvious if I have a knife. I mean, that's a personal thing. And then with your bike, thinking about possibly getting stuck on the road and needing a tire plug kit or an air pump. I have both on my bike, and they're very useful. I just hope it's one of those things that you just hope you never have to use, but it's there. A bike cover for those nights when you are parked at the hotel and you don't want people seeing what you have. Those are important. And bike covers are so compact now. You can totally get one. I have one that fits. It's really small, and it fits. It's a half cover, and sometimes it's all you need, because out of sight, out of mind, no one touches your stuff. An appropriate toolkit for the stuff that you need to fix your bike, or like Allen keys if you are using BMW. It's probably a Torx set, things like that. You also want to make sure that you bring additional things just in case you hope you never have to use them. But surprisingly, in my last trip, I ended up helping some other people because I had them. One of them being an extra USB charging cable. For the RAM mount X grip phone mount, if you use that, the tips come off, the rubber tips that hold the phone in place. I brought a few extra and I ended up giving a rider one of the tips because it had fallen off. Also, if you are using a camelback of some sort, the little bite valves that you use to bite on to suck the water when you're drinking on the road, you might want to bring those with you too. Tape of any sort is wonderful. Electrical tape is usually the good go-to because it's small. You might want to consider bringing a small cable lock, like a combination cable lock for your helmet, especially if you've stuffed your bags to the gills and you have no room to put it in there when you usually do. Also, never hurts to bring spray detailer for your helmet and for your bike. Bring a little cloth. You might need to wipe some buggies on the road. The bugs are pretty bad, especially if you're traveling outside of California. You're pretty much being hit with everything that used to be alive at one point. So you might want to consider that. So other things to consider while you're out there is you may want to consider roadside assistance, especially if you're going to be traveling across the United States. AAA is always a great go-to. I had to upgrade to the RV motorcycle package, which is a bit more expensive, but that's one option. If you are a member of the American Motorcyclist Association, they do offer roadside assistance as part of your membership. And also your personal insurance might have that as an option as well. Just make sure you're signed up for something, just in case something happens to you. If you're really doing some hardcore stuff, travel insurance might be a good idea, especially if you're in a position where you have to get airlifted. I actually just signed up for SkyMed, which was presented at our ride-in a few weeks ago. Also because it applies to anything involving a cruise or traveling internationally. So, and if you are crossing into Mexico, they usually offer that kind of insurance too, like some sort of travel insurance. You might want to check with your travel agency or with AAA to see if that's something if you are planning to ride internationally. You also might want to bring some baby wipes. You'd be surprised where those would be helpful. And yes, for all the ladies there, bring some extra feminine products, even just to freshen up. I found that the stuff that I was thinking of in the back of my head, I ended up using during this trip. It was one of those weird trips where I thought about it and I actually called it. So definitely make that a thing. Also, you want to think about the nice things. For example, networking on the road is a thing. I ran into some wonderful people on the road. I ran into some great riders on the road. Actually, one of my favorite ones was I had made it to Crescent City, California. This was coming down the 101 on my way back down toward home. And I realized that my handguard had gone loose on the left side. So my clutch handguard had gone loose, and I needed to go get a replacement, a wrench. And it was a Torx wrench, and it was one of the things that I did not pack with me. So I pull up to this Harbor Freight, and there's another dude over there who has a Goldwing, and he looks like he's packed and he's going places. And I ended up stopping next to him, and we had this wonderful chat for about 40 minutes because I really didn't have too much to do. And it turned out that he had the Torx wrench that I needed. And so we started our conversation with me fixing the piece that was loose. And by the way, it's still on there. It hasn't come off yet. And after that lovely chat, we ended up exchanging Instagram handles. And so I've been following his ride because he was actually going in the opposite direction. And just recently, he just made it to the Arctic Circle. So I was really cool to meet that person randomly in Crescent City who happened to have the one thing that I needed to fix. And I really appreciate, meeting those kinds of people and networking. So that was super cool. Other things, too, you want to consider is a folding camping chair. I realized that an REI FlexLite fits in the side case of a BMW, which means it can probably fit in the side case of several other motorcycles, or it can be tied down to the back of your bike with a rock strap. I love the folding camping chair. Believe me, if you're just sitting next to your bike and you don't want to sit on your bike, it's nice to have that. And yes, if you're one of those people that like stuffed animals, why not bring one? I can say we often have this thing with Women on Wheels members that if you're carrying around a frog, we probably know who you're affiliated with. So it doesn't have to be a frog. I just had to say that. So just something to think about. So back to that whole rock strap thing. I mean, really, with enough creativity, you can carry just about anything. It's an art form. It really is. And there's just a few rules about it. One of them being that if it's heavy and it's bulky, you might want to consider distribution of space and weight because you still need to be able to use your own seat because you don't want to be standing that whole time. One of the things that you're going to notice in the bottom picture there is that was actually the loadout that I took to ride all the way out to South Dakota. That is me. That's my bike in front of my final destination in South Dakota, which was the Best Western Ramkota, which was the site of our event back in June. And you can see that I made sure that everything that I had strapped down was pushed as far back as possible, so I had room for my seat and myself. And because everything is in straps, some things may have shifted during travel. You may want, you want to make sure that you're checking your stuff regularly to make sure nothing shifted funny while you've been moving. The other thing too is that it's shipping stuff is totally fine. That's what these services are for, And I will say the orange case in that photo, it was actually specific to the event I was attending, and once it was over, there was a UPS store a mile and a half from the hotel, and that's where it went, and it went home ahead of me. I didn't mind doing that. A little funny story about the box on the top, that's the top picture, is that I used those rock straps to fasten down that box that I actually purchased. This is in the parking lot of a box store in Vancouver, Canada, because somebody found out I was in Canada and asked me if I could ship home a bunch of the Canadian Lay's potato chips in the funny flavors that we don't have here in the States. No joke. And she goes, I know you can do it. And I go, I know I can, but you're asking me to do something pretty absurd. Mind you, this is one of my best friends from high school, and we went to a really nerdy math and science high school, so doing absurd things like this wasn't actually out of the question. But what I needed was straps that could take a box back to my Airbnb room so that I could pack that and then carry the box across the border and then ship it from the post office in Washington State. So that actually happened. I thought that was one of the funniest stunts I probably did during that trip. And you know what? It was great. So I can't really argue with that. So how much should I take with me? Well, it's a matter of trial and error and figuring out what's the proper balance for you. What are you willing to carry? And also making sure that you leave room for some extras, because you're going to leave with souvenirs. You're going to bring some extra crap with you. It's just going to happen. So with that being said, take advantage of what is available to you on the road, like laundromats, like shipping centers. Everybody's going to buy a souvenir t-shirt that might become part of your wardrobe while you're on the road. And of course, Walmarts are everywhere, and supermarkets, and all of the sorts of other things. I mean, when I went to Seattle, I went to the mothership REI store. And if you are familiar with REI, Recreational Equipment, I think it's the incorporated REI. It's a great chain. They have a lot of stuff that you can grab there. So it's important to try to minimize your footprint on your motorcycle because it does add up after a while. So going to section 3, hydration and cooling. How important is it? In this picture here, you're going to see that's called a moto jug, and that is actually a 1-gallon Coleman jug filled with ice water with a straw going right through it. It's connected, and that straw weaves strings all the way to my cockpit. I pull the straw, goes underneath my helmet, and I can sip while I'm riding. Another version of this would be, a Camelback, which is how I started when I was doing stuff like this 15 years ago. So drinking while riding, as I mentioned, that moto jug was one option. You can also wear the Camelback. I'm not a fan of doing that if my ride is super long, because after a while, do you really want to be carrying a bunch of water behind you? I mean, the weight does add up after a while, even though it feels light at first. Also, you can have the hydration bladder inside of a tank bag. That is another option as well. So you've got options here. Drink cup holders for those who like to sip while they're riding. Some people who prefer to ride with like an open face helmet like these kinds of things. Also, it's nice to just be able to carry an extra drink with you because you can. And ice everything. Might as well. Cold water goes a long way here. And even the ice water that you carry with you, you can even use it to re-soak your scarf or your neck tube. So it does go a long way with that. If you want to put hydration tablets in it, like for flavor and stuff, that's completely your call. But keep yourself hydrated because the symptoms when they hit, oh, it's bad. You don't want to deal with that. I was also mentioning that whole thing about cooling tubes. That's what a neck gaiter or cooling scarf looks like. The mesh, the evaporative cooling vest is great. The other thing too is the mesh jacket. Now this is where I mentioned earlier that it was going to be slightly controversial in terms of what should I be wearing when the temperatures are stupid hot. Well, the big thing is that we cool down naturally by sweat. If you have seen video or photos of people who live in the high deserts, like in the Middle East and things like that, you notice that their robes are very long and flowy and they're covered from head to toe, which also, protects from the sun's rays and you don't get skin damage that way. But the big thing is that they rely on the body's natural sweat to help with cooling because when your body perspires, that moisture in your skin hits the wind, cools everything down. So that's your body acting like a natural radiator. And because you're moving, the air will go through the holes in your jacket and everywhere else and hit those wet areas and give you that cooling sensation. With that being said, the reason why I say that mesh jackets are kind of optional or questionable is that if you wear a mesh jacket in hot weather and you wear it long enough, the water that's on your cooling vest or in anything else you're wearing or the sweat on your body is actually going to evaporate too quickly and it won't even be useful. That means you're drying yourself out longer, faster than you should. And that's actually why I prefer no mesh jackets when I'm riding in triple digits. I would rather just sweat my butt off and allow my body to do the cooling and then make up for it by drinking tons of water while I'm riding. That is my philosophy on that. Obviously, other people will beg to differ, but when I was riding through 113 degrees on Interstate 5 on the way back home, that's what I relied on, and I was able to ride 90 miles straight while sipping water and getting everything going before I had to go and re-soak everything and then keep riding. So that worked for me, but you've got to figure out your own style. The big thing is that when you're riding, open all the vents, let the air flow through, and that is what's going to cool you down. It's not the fact that there's mesh. Yeah, it helps when you're in the city and you're not doing this for a long time, but if you're going long distance, cover yourself up, allow the sweat to work for you. So, mental and physical fortitude. How do we put ourselves in that mindset and also physically prepare ourselves to be able to do these kinds of rides? I mentioned at the beginning that riding for distance is not a race. It's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. You're going to be doing this for a long time. So definitely thinking about how do you put yourself in a place where you can actually do these things. Well, the big thing is that a little prep goes a long way. So one of the things that I did prior to my trip was definitely um, telling myself that I need to eat a bit better, making sure that I upped my protein, making sure that I was always hydrated on a good diet, that my body felt good going into this whole thing. And also one thing that a lot of, especially ladies, okay, now in terms of the other aspects of my life, I'm also a hockey player. I'm a goalie actually, and I still play for a university. And so for me, I'm always active and I do some gym training. I'm not a gym rat per se, but I do train at least one to two times a week and also play hockey. So I'm always active and I'm always building up the strength. And I really attribute strength, stamina, and to good cardio and keeping those weights up. Because the thing is that when you're riding through the elements, when you're riding through all of these things, you are subjecting yourself to wind blast, you're subjecting yourself to temperatures, you have that motorcycle, the physics of that bike, you're sitting for long hours, but also making sure that you stay alert. There's a lot going on when you're riding a bike, and everything multiplies when you are doing distance. So it's important to feel good going into the ride and making sure that that you're conditioned to withstand those kinds of things. Also, subjecting yourself to conditions that you normally don't experience. Like, for example, I'm from Southern California. We do not know what rain is until that really one random week in December when it floods for a week and we're all floating, and then it goes away until like November. Okay. Humidity. That's another thing too. How do you ride through these uncomfortable situations? And that's where it goes back to figuring out the gear and figuring out what you need for yourself. So that goes into our next bullet. What kind of gear should I be wearing? Well, that's all personal preference. It's all up to you. There's a lot of ways that you can figure that out. Definitely talking to many people. Definitely talk to people outside the genre of motorcycle riding. Like, one thing too is I know that there's a lot of people who prefer cruisers and that's the only thing they ride. But perhaps you might want to learn a thing or two from the adventure bike riders who end up in the desert all the time. Or you might want to talk to other people like the sport bike riders. What do they use to stay comfortable if they're in a weird position like all day, riding? Because or something like that. Find people outside of the style of motorcycle that you currently ride. You'd be surprised what you learn. I've learned a few things from very, very diverse riders. I mean, that ride I currently ride an adventure bike right now, but at one point I was a sport touring person, and one point before that I rode a naked bike. And at one point I had considered cruisers. And I've ridden with a lot of people with cruisers, and I learn a lot of things on the road, especially watching how setups are created. So open your mind to these kinds of things. Don't focus on any one brand. Don't focus on any one style. Think about what makes things comfortable and go from there. So, of course, not only knowing yourself is important, but it's also knowing your bike. The easiest way to reduce the amount of fear you have for your bike is actually knowing how the thing runs. And the only way that you can know how the thing runs is by riding it, right? That also goes back to our beginning section here, where we're thinking about what are the things that will make your bike work for you when you are riding those long distances. So that's just something to really think about here. The more you know, the less freaked out you'll be. I will say, even though I owned my BMW for a year and a half prior to taking it on this really long journey, there were things that I was still learning about that motorcycle going in a 5,500 mile loop that really made me appreciate the bike, and also helped me understand where I could be better as a rider operating this vehicle. So these are just things to think about. So during the ride, mentally, people like long distance riding because it takes them away from what prevents them from thinking openly and freely. You think a lot about stuff, even random stuff. Sometimes stuff that just comes up from, it's almost like what I like to call the shower thoughts. If you've ever taken a shower and then randomly you get that one idea while you're taking a shower, it's kind of like that, except you're on a motorcycle. It's like the ultimate shower thought if you're on a motorcycle. And it really is okay to take those breaks when you need to. If you feel good, go for that extra, 30, 40 miles. Why not? You're feeling like in a groove, It's all you. Of course, keep track of your weather changes. If you see some clouds overhead, you might want to think about it. If the wind's starting to pick up, you might want to think about it. I'm not saying don't do it. I mean, think about it. what is safe for, what do you consider is safe and reasonable for you. And of course, there are times when it's better to not ride and to just stop right there. I was really grateful. I have a friend in Coos Bay, Oregon, and that's on the coast. But because of my minimal knowledge of certain sections of Oregon, I thought I was going to be able to make it to Coos Bay at night, and I called my friend up, and she basically said, "I don't advise you to do that. I need you to stay in Eugene." And I go, "Yes, ma'am." So it was one of those things where it was like, and she explained very succinctly, elk. Okay, I'm not going to screw with elk at night. That's not happening. So I decided to just get that hotel room and do that. It was so worth it though, because I'll tell you, the ride into Coos Bay, absolutely gorgeous. That was a lot of fun. And I didn't cross into any elk, but there were elk viewing stations, which meant there could have been elk. I actually did find elk later, but that was when I re-entered California. And they were just basically walking across the road, and we were all at a complete stop, and I busted out my phone camera, and it was a lot of fun. So you'll get those too. So we're almost on the home stretch here. Ride planning, because even randomness needs a general direction. And this quote actually is a on a mural at the REI Mothership store in Seattle, Washington. I didn't know where I was going until I got there. And sometimes I feel like that when I'm traveling, because I like to plan to some degree, but there's always a chance for randomness. And that's my style for that. So the question is that, are you going to travel alone or in a group? This is something I'm just going to touch on briefly. But regardless of if you're doing so, you need to prepare your bike exactly the same way. Because ultimately, even though you're with people, you do have to take care of yourself. And also, if you are in a group, one of the nice advantages is that if you are riding with people that you know well, you can coordinate as to who's going to carry what. And that could be very useful. That also allows people to be able to diversify what they're bringing with them, themselves, and that you're not duplicating anything. Or somebody could have a specialty and they could have that. I was just thinking about the Olympics when I just said that, because everybody likes Steve right now on the men's gymnastics team. And what was his one specialty? Well, pommel horse. Well, he did it, right? So, sometimes you will have your friends that know your strengths and work with them. It's the whole point about being on a good team. But if you're riding alone, same thing applies. Make sure what you have to take care of yourself. And I don't know. I find a lot of solace in riding alone, but that is a personal preference. And sometimes I like friends. Just depends on what the ride's all about, and whether or not they can keep up with my pace. So, like I said, personal thing. So, are you going digital? I love planning digitally. I have friends that are old school with the maps, but for me, being an IT person and knowing that there are so many apps out there that can filter stuff and just make it easy for me to figure out, well, I like sporting that kind of technology. So some of your software app suggestions, for example, Google Maps is great. There's also another one called Google My Maps, which is a custom map that you can create that will help plot out your journey. It's not going to give you turn-by-turn directions unless you go to Google Maps and put all the stuff in manually. But it'll allow you to create these custom maps so that you can at least see like how your route's going to look. The programs that I personally use, they are paid to some degree. One of them is InRoute, which if you look at the bottom graphic with the blue lines, you can see one of the routes that I took and all of the stops that I had planned along the way. Of course, all of these stops were plus minus, but these stops were basically meant to be about 125 to 140 miles apart. This was actually for a timed run that I was doing. For those taking notes, it was a iron butt bun burner 1500 gold attempt, and if you look at the top, you can also see an example of an Apple app called Weather on the Way, where if you put in your start and your destination and how much time you'll be traveling, it'll actually tell you exactly at one time and what weather conditions will be hitting at the time that you approach those roads. So that's probably something that you may want to look into as well. Another one I don't have the screenshot for is called DMD2. It's only for Android, but what it does is that it is a secondary digital cockpit that can show GPS tracking, speedometer, and other shortcuts on your phone. I prefer using this because my BMW does not have a TFT screen, so I use that as the replacement to the TFT. That was actually intentional because I don't like TFT screens right now. I work enough in IT that I don't want to see any more. I don't see any more screens past what I have to. That's, like I said, personal preference. So before you go on the ride, this is important no matter how far you travel, honestly. Is your bike maintained? Did you send it to the shop? Did you do your oil change? Did you make sure that everything is is tightened and everything else isn't falling off? Did you inflate your tires? Did you check your tire pressure? Do all your lights and instruments work? Do you have your high beam and your low beam and all your blinkers? Now, for those who took the MSF course, safety course many years ago, T-clock, I believe, was the safety check before you ride off on the road. If you remember T-clock, that would be your base of check. That's the way you go. Did you forget anything? Did you remember to put your snacks in your bag? Did you bring your appropriate devices and luggage? And are you ready to go? Are you going to head out there? Are you ready? Is your head on straight? And most importantly, make sure you wear your pants. Pants are important. I like pants. Okay, they're a great idea. Just wear pants. All right. So we're getting to the last section here. Appreciate everyone who's been stinking around this far. We're going to have this on request later. But there is a running joke with me, and I will tell the story about this. But this particular IKEA store here, I believe, is, I'm going to say that's Coquitlam, British Columbia, which is a suburb of the Vancouver area. So I'll talk about that in just a bit. And yes, one of the things I like to do is stickers. I love my stickers. It's kind of like my weird passport of where I've been and what I'm doing. So my cases have stickers, and they get added as I travel along. So when you're tracking your journeys, some people have asked, how do I track my journey for myself, and how do I share it with other people? Well, there's ways that you can do that. There's a lot of really good apps out there. There's one that I like to use called Relive, which is more of a fun tracker that creates a video after you've completed the journey. And I usually like to place that one to music. I've posted a few of these and that one's a fun one. Another one too, there are several. Real-time GPS tracker is really useful. Another one is a combination of two programs called Bubbler GPS and Spotwalla. Identically, there is a Apple version of it called SW Tracker, and these two programs, two program combinations, are used by people who do longer distance runs or iron butt runs because they require verification of the ride by showing GPS reporting. And this is also great too because there are a lot of really cool settings on here where you can share the link and people can log in. And what it'll do is it'll show a map of where you are, and then every several minutes or so it'll show your location in minute intervals. So that might be something that you want to consider. Another one is actually more generic and is used for people whether or not they're on a motorcycle. It's called Life 360. And that one is used as a family tracker. Some people like to use that when they're around, just so you know where people are. So that's one that you can use. Also, GPS tracker devices, which are available at any given like camping store or any place that sells electronics of that sort. Garmin InReach and Spot are the two most popular. And personally, I use Garmin InReach. They are both subscription based. The Garmin one I like because it's subscription based, but you can turn off the subscription when you're not using it. So like right now, I'm not using it. I decide to go on a trip or I decide to go somewhere else. I can go ahead and just renew the subscription for like 1 month at a time, and it'll just do it for me. So those, as you can see here, the screenshot to the right, this was my Garmin InReach tracker. So you can see, actually, no, I take that back. That was not my Garmin InReach tracker. That was my Bubbler GPS and Spot Wallet tracker. And as you can see here, it was taking photos of, or taking snapshots of where I was at certain intervals. So, something to consider. So, my running joke. One of the things that I like to do when I do these long rides is that I like to stop at a wonderful Swedish furniture store called IKEA, and there's a chain of them, and they're worldwide. And I've made it a point that whenever I rode on my motorcycle and I'm able to tag one, that I would. And I would usually go there to stop and have a break. And the story behind this was that it started because my brother's very first job, so I have a younger brother, and his first paid job was at the IKEA by the house we grew up in. And so I'd visit him regularly, and we'd have dinner there because IKEAs have a restaurant. And what had happened was, because I live in Southern California, IKEAs are actually pretty close to each other, and within reason, I could visit 2 to 3 of them. And it just became this running joke that I should just go visit IKEAs because I'm already going to a bunch of different ones. And I've actually been to IKEAs all over the United States and in Canada. Some of them not by motorcycle, but nevertheless, I visited them. So it just became one of those things where it's like, I might as well do this since I'm here. I know that there's this couple that made national headlines where they said, hey, let's visit every Cracker Barrel restaurant in the United States, and they actually did it. So it's not far from absurd, to be honest, because there's far more Cracker Barrel stores than there are IKEA ones. Also, one thing that I like, always find an oasis when you're riding your motorcycle places. For example, Harley Davidson dealerships are pretty good oasis no matter what kind of bike you ride. I was treated very nicely many years ago at the Harley Davidson dealership in St. George, Utah, and I actually ended up at a barbecue there run by a Christian motorcycle group, and I was like, okay, this is pretty bomb. Like, that's cool. Costco's. Clean bathrooms and gas? I would. And not only that, and if you travel internationally, always take your Costco card with you because it works internationally. I used it in Montreal. It does work. But with that being said, IKEA's too. Cheap food, clean bathrooms, and a place where people go there just to chill. Like, if you really wanted to sit on that couch for a while, you could. Yeah, that's what that's for. So, yeah, don't knock it till you try it, because I'm a millennial and I'm too broke to do anything. And what happened was, I have high school friends and a childhood friend that live in Portland, Oregon, and they have a kid. And I said, hey, let's have lunch at IKEA. And they beelined it to IKEA because that's pretty much the only thing we can afford nowadays. Not even kidding. So, yeah, IKEAs are great. So just for amusement purposes, I'm going to go from bottom to top. The bottom IKEA is Tempe, Arizona. The second IKEA in the middle is Richmond, British Columbia, and the third one is Coquitlam, that is the uncropped version of the picture that you saw at the beginning of this section. So I've so far been, as of this presentation, I've been to 21 different IKEA stores. 3 of them in Canada, 2 in British Columbia, and 1 in Ontario, which is actually Ottawa. So I know that the province of Alberta, which is next door, has 2 IKEAs, one in Calgary and the other in Edmonton, and I know that I can hit them if I stay on I-15. I'm plotting. Yes, I am. I'm already plotting this next one. So yeah. So last but not least, we're gonna be closing up here and also opening this up for questioning. But in conclusion, the best way to prepare is to plan, and in turn you end up reducing the anxiety and fear of traveling. I do get a little bit nervous when I'm getting ready for a giant trip like that, but like, once you get on the road, everything goes, all of those fears go out, because then you realize that you're just doing what you said you were going to do, and it's going to be a fun time because you're going to see so many cool things. Trial and error, it's part of it. You're going to learn what works for you, what doesn't. There were a lot of add-ons and deletions in my planning for this, and it's learning is what makes it so fun, because you're going to work through those mistakes. You're going to see things that you normally wouldn't see if you were just commuting to work. So how do you get past them? Because the satisfaction comes when you conquer those fears, you conquer those issues. You really get, it's really exciting when you do. I've had a few situations where they were so unique to the trip, but then they were resolved, and it was like, yes, this is how this works. This is what we're doing. So, every adventure is yours. Make it unique, and tell those stories. I've had a great time this evening sharing these things with you. Throwing in a couple little stories here and there. I mean, I'm looking at 20 years of motorcycle riding, which are tons of stories I could probably write a book about. And people are like, we should write a book about it. I'm like, do I think I have time for that? Right? But really, you got to make this yours. You got to inspire others. That's one of the cool things about being part of like a women's motorcycle enthusiast organization, is that you get to share these stories with people from all over the country. And when you have the chance to be able to meet up with these people after either never meeting them before or haven't seen them for multiple years, that was my problem, the latter part. You know, you can only do so much when you share on social media, but sometimes when you're just sitting down with someone and going, man, I gotta tell you about that weird thing that happened the other day, it's beautiful, because you will always have something to talk about, because it took you a while to get to where you need to be. And as I like to say to many, many people, especially those female writers out there that are still trying to wonder if they want to do this or not, the only person stopping you is you. And I personally think that you wouldn't want to stop yourself, would you? So, get out there, get on a motorcycle, do the things, ask the questions, try, make the mistakes, get up, do it again. You're going to build that confidence in yourself, and that's what matters. Even if your first long distance ride for yourself is LA to San Diego, that's still an accomplishment in itself. Start small. If even just making it making your commute to work your daily, if that's your achievement, you've made it to one step. Now let's see if you can push it further. You've got this. This is all, it's all you. So that's pretty much my presentation this evening. I kept it below an hour and a half. If you have questions or any comments, and by the way, this picture of me, this is over in Seattle. I went to this place called Biscuit Bitch. It is it is in downtown Seattle. They're known for really amazing breakfast sandwiches and things that involve biscuits. And you got to do Biscuit Bitch if you're ever in Seattle, and definitely ride a motorcycle there because it's easier to park. But if you have questions, my email address is right there, and you can always hit me up on Instagram as Two-Wheeled Tourist. That's TWO spelled out, Two-Wheeled Tourist on Instagram, and I'm always around to answer these questions and be out there as a resource, because I'll tell you, when I first started riding, my first few influencers for me when I was a rookie rider were people who did long distance iron butt style rides. So I was badly influenced by the people that felt that going to Las Vegas and back in one day was fun. So that's where I got my stuff from. And yes, to answer your question, this will be available later. I will make sure it's available later. It will be distributed. I should be able to put it on YouTube as well. But yeah. So questions that I'm getting here, and please feel free to contribute. What's a good limit to ride in a day? You know, that's a very open question. It's all dependent on comfort level. Some people, especially if you're new to this, you know, riding 200 miles in a single day would be a stretch for you. But then there are people like me, for example, where I remember my final day, this was like 2013. I had made it to Minnesota. At the time, I was still living in Ohio, so I needed to get from the western edge of Minnesota all the way back to Columbus, Ohio. And I realized it was 863 miles. And my body just told me, you know what? You just need to go home. Just ride it, go. And that's what happened was I rode the 863 miles home and I didn't care because my body was like, let's go. And then there's some days where you don't feel like you want to do that. So it is really, it's very variable, especially when you have to factor in things like your overall fatigue, weather conditions, where you have to be, personal preferences. There's a lot going on here. So I would say that is a number that you want to answer for yourself, depending on your writing abilities and also what you're able to and what you choose to withstand for yourself. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah. So any other fun questions here? Are we gonna call this a day? Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna do what I can to make this public by video of some sort. I think I'm gonna make that happen. Hopefully, you know, we'll have some fun with this. So yeah, definitely can make that happen. I really hope that people got something out of this. I hope to do another lecture of this sort, of a similar topic or something else. I will always be open to suggestions. And yeah, with that being said, I think I'm gonna call it a day here. Enjoy the rest of your evening. It's 7 o'clock here on the West Coast. It's probably a little late for you guys on the East, but like I said, appreciate the time and thank you for entertaining this presentation. This is the first of what I hope is to be, hope to be many in a series like this. And keep writing. Stay safe and continue to enjoy what you do, no matter what it is. And if it just happens to be motorcycles, then you came to the right place. So that being said, have a good night, everybody, and I'll see you on the road.